Okay, so welcome. First, we'll listen to Mario Roberto Solarte from Javeriana University, Colombia, who will talk about monster, guardian, or maternal beings from the ruins of peace to the possibility of peace. The floor is yours. The possibility of hope. Oh, okay. There.
So here, this is a synthesis or abstract of the text. The text is too long. David have the text is
Someone is interested by like
is very long. This is a history for a woman in Colombia that the True Commission quote in a book about testimony for the victims. She lost her husband, and she feel that she died at the same time. This is the abstract of the quotation.
okay. Is a real study?
The history is real, but the picture is not. It's,
Yeah. That date.
the context of this reflection is the war in different parts of the world. All we know that the political situation in all the countries is very difficult because the polarization and the fracture of the societies. And in other places, the war, Russia against Ukraine, Israel against Hamas, and many wars in Africa and Asia, the big tension between China and United States. This is the reason that we ask for the question, where is your brother? Is the central question of the text. Another false picture. In Colombia, the situation is very difficult because the peace process of 2016 is successful, but now we are in very difficult conflict with 5 different groups and 63 minor conflicts in different regions. And in Mexico, there are trouble with crime, migration, and forced disappearance. The question is how we can express our solidarity with victims and reduce the violence. Yesterday, James Crawford ended his lecture talking about the solidarity against the war in Ukraine and Russia. But it's difficult in reality to do the solidarity with the people. I try to explore this situation with 3 different images: the monster, the guardian, and the maternal love. The monster is the theory of Hobbes. Hobbes say that the human beings in natural live in war one each other, and the human need to create the state because they love the liberty and the life, and make a treatment or convention and create the state. The state is a artificial monster the, how to say, Leviathan? Leviathan? In English. We say in Spanish Leviathan, in English? Leviathan, okay, Leviathan. Leviathan is a monster. It's an artificial man. It's stronger and more powerful than any man. And the state has the sovereignty to use the violence against the people. The argument that the human are equal, but are very vulnerable. And in the state of nature, there are no public authorities, and the people need to resolve this conflict. There are many conflicts for different reasons, and the people love their life and liberty, and this is the reason for they create the state. The first part, the conflict between the humans is similar to Girard, the theory, imitation, and rivalry. But the second part, that the state is made by agreement, Girard said is impossible. You know, the reason the people don't have their enough reason or language of cultural sources for create in a state. Girard said this is a process in this history, and this process is religious way. This is the central argument of Hobbes. The state guarantee the secure the rights and liberties for the individual, but the individual renounce for their liberty. This is Leviathan. This is the book, the original book. This is the monster. You know, this is a biblical figure. There are in many places. Monster for the sea, but here is a big man, the king. Christoph Smith, who is a professor in South Africa, say that Hobbes used the monster card, the biblical monster, to symbolize the state and against the cause of civil war, because that is Behemoth, another biblical monster. The state, I can't say this. Leviathan used the violence against the civil war. You remember Hobbes write this text in the context of civil wars in England. The revolutions changed the state, and Hobbes write against the revolution. Girard find the sacrificial mechanisms. You know, the mimetic crisis, the all against all, is resolved by the sacrificial. I think this idea is very close to Colson Whitehead's novel Zone 1. You know, it's a novel about zombies in New York. The text repeats many times, I always want to live in New York. Colson Whitehead is a writer for New York, for Harvard, and win many prizes for the novel, the different novels, but he's a black man. And many of the novels talk about the situation of the black people. In this novel, the central character, Mark Steep, is a black man. Mark Steep is the swimmer, the champion of the Olympic Games, but the people say this is Mark Steep because they can swim. In the novel, repeatedly say the black people never can swim.
Huge.
That New York is plenty of zombies. The zombies, I think, representing the values in all the ways. It's very interesting because in the novel, there are zombies and the text says something about the way the life they live before the pandemic. And in the novel, the people is try to rebuild the social order using the violence, using the military forces, using bombs, and something like this. It's very similar to Girard's reflection of the crisis of indifferentiation. All the people is zombies, all the forces is militaries and militaries as anonymous people, all equal. Is two big forces, very indifferentiated. This is Marcus Stipp in the last pages of the novel. All the people is die, and he decide to swim in the middle of the zombies. The people in the novel try to do a safe war using the violences, but the war collapsed. New York collapsed definitely, and against the Leviathan, Behemoth is the dominating the end of the novel. The second part, the part 3, this text in this way is Cain Abel history in the Genesis. You know, the Cain killed Abel, and God asked for Abel, and Cain replies, "Am I my brother guardian?" And this reflection is what mean guardian. What it mean the word guardian? This is important to know that this kind of text, reflects ancient tradition about rivalry. There are in many cultures, and Girard says something about this, like Romulo and Remo, or something like this.
Good.
In the text of Genesis, it's very clear that Cain is feel envy against Abel. It is not clear what is the reason, but the envy is clear. In the text from Girard, our translation, the Evolution and Conversion, Girard said, Adam, Eve, and Cain's collective name represent the foundational murders in the same culture. Always is the war and the sacrifice to begin the civilization, and the law is the representation of this murder, ritual murder, because the law origin is this murder. Because Girard said that because it's very strange in the text that God defend Cain, and Girard said no, this is the law that defend, and Cain is the founder of the culture, the institution, domestication of animal, music, technology. This is a point of the El Prado issue. Girard said that Voltaire is an illustrated man, no Christian, very different to Girard, but say the same that Girard. The law represents the protection against the violence. Girard identified this God with Satan, not the biblical God of the New Testament, the father of Jesus, but Satan. The God of the text in the Genesis is Satan. Satan is the unstable structure of human relation ruled by violence and scapegoating. This is Girard. In Genesis 4, verse 7, the text talk about the sin. The sin is like a monster, but we, the human, can't manage the site against the sin. Miriam Berger say that this text talk about the formation about the moral rules, and I think she don't quote Girard, but is very close to Girard, because the law, the moral law, beginning in the sacrificial crisis. Cain, in the first part of the text, denied the crime, but in the end of the text, he accepts the foundation of civilization, the rules, and the coexistence with others, and accept the responsibility because he is the founder of the cities. The cities have rules, the rules of brothers. Be the guardian of the brother is respect the rules for respect the other in the city. Girard suggests that this kind of fraternity, based on the sacrificial mechanisms, create the culture and the violence to control the violences, to control the revenge. In the last part of the text, I talk about the mothers, but I don't like to talk about the mother like a saint, woman, sacrificial woman, only love, true love. I use the text, the John Steinbeck, is of Eden, and the character of Katy Ames, that is the mother. It's of Eden is a big reflection based on the text of Genesis. Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel is the characters. Katy is a monster. It's a monster, but Steinbeck say that the monster is very close to normality. It's no real situation. She is a monster, but all of we do things like monsters. The novel explores different characters in that have many definitions and try to fight against his normality and his or their deficiencies. All the characters are maybe do things like monster or normal people. This is the film. It's a very bad picture. For Steinbeck, monstruousness include various sensations of incompleteness, suggesting that everyone had monstrousness in our desire. It's no something real. All of we are monster and normal people. The situation is not that the woman is bad person. Is all of we can do very bad things. And in the text, the bad and the good thing is very close. It's not very clear. Katy is at the same time mother and prostitute. Katy, in the beginning of the novel, is a mother, but they go to a prostíbulo.
It's brothel.
Brot?
And brothel.
Brot?
Brothel?
Okay. Border. Well, she looks like a prostitute, and in the text, her son go to to her and had sex with she, and in the text she recognized that she's the mother and prostitute, and in the end of the text she commit suicide. It's a very difficult situation. She never converts. Maybe the suicidal for her is a kind of conversion, but kind is the people who converse in the text. The text is very ambiguous to use a word created by Steinberg and said, try to do the things that you do. Is always you maybe do like a monster, or maybe do like a normal person. This act is very clear in the reflection of Girard about the two prostitutes in the Old Testament. The prostitute, you remember one of the prostitute said, kill the children, and the other, no, kill the children. And Girard said this sacrifice of the good prostitute prefigure the Christ sacrifice and offer the hope for the positive mimesis. I think in the Girard theory, the mimetic desire, the positive desire, and this kind of symbolic language try to say as we can change and convert and do the things in other ways, like Steinberg. And that's our responsibility, like Levinas said, our responsibility is unconditional responsibility for others, like a mother, said Levinas. And then in the text, I quote two phrases for two different women talking about this man. This man was Cristian Hurtado Meneses, a young man killed by the police in 2021 in Bogota. There was a terrible night. There was 14 young persons killed by the police, and more than 300 persons injured, and many policemen, and more than 70 police places destroyed in fire. It's very, very bad situation. And the mother and her best friend tried to do some maternal memory. The maternal memory is try to say, this is no Christian, not was an vandal, because the communication media and the government say this is a vandal. The police only defend and kill these people only in defense. But in the history for the mother and the friend, Christian go for the mother house and go to their house, and police killed. Going out to the mother house with any reason. The maternal memory try to restore the innocence of Christian. I see this is similar in the gospel. The gospel, Chris was, I say this the other days in the UNAM, but Girard say this. Jesus was assassinated like a criminal, the worst criminal. All the people asked for kill Jesus. And the gospel is a positive memory for Jesus, a different memory for Jesus. He's not a criminal, a person to need to kill, but Jesus is a lover person, a peaceful person. There are not reasons to kill Jesus. This is the similar text. The mother and their friends talk in positive way about Christian, and this is the kind of positive mimesis to receive for the ruin of moral representation. The moral representation is in ruin when the government and the media say the people was killed, and with all the reason. No reason for kill people. This is the synthesis of the text. Thank you. Comments on questions?
Thank you, Roberto. My question comes, and maybe it's in your paper, and I'll have to ask for the paper. I'm wondering if when you talk about the monsters and you bring into Hobbes Leviathan into the process of your thought, how do you see Girard's idea of the monstrous double as we mirror one another, but in a sickening or almost like a pathological way, in which we're not the guardian and we're not willing to become that maternal memory for our foes, for our enemies. Could you expand a little bit on that and how maybe that informs what you're presenting to us today?
I don't quote the text from Girard talking about the monster, the double monster, and the creation for the enemies to sacrifice. But it's the same process, I think. When the government say the people is vandal, is a monster. It's a monster. And there are many interpretations about the Steinbeck novel saying this woman is a monster and this is necessary that she commit suicide. This is not a real reason. This is a creating a monster, a justification for violences. I said in Girardian way, there are no reason for kill any people and kill oneself. There's no reason for this. This is a way for justification and to create violence against one or another people. I try to say that it's important to learn to renounce of all the kind of violence. Yes, but I don't quote this text. I always in the major part of the text I quote the evolution and conversion because I read evolution and conversion this day. I only have one quotation of Girard values of sacred, only one sign, but the text is focused in evolution and conversion. Thank you.
Then we can listen to Nicolas Aguia. Mimetic images of conflict and accumulation, negative reciprocity in José María Arguedas' Every Blood. I also like to point out that Nicolas is also a composer. So, and that his next talk on the COV&R conference will be about music.
Not today, I'm sorry. Just the conclusion a little bit, but that's it. And well, before I said, I'm happy to present because I was Roberto's student at Javeriana. So if I do a bad job, it's not a reflection on Roberto. I just want to say it's all my own doing. So the novel Every Blood by Peruvian writer José María Arguedas stages what Cornejo Polar calls the conflictive heterogeneity that characterizes the historical processes of racial miscegenation, mestizaje, in the Peruvian Andes. The antagonistic environment of intersubjective relations shaped by colonialism and social stratification is also affected by the haunting present of industrial capitalism. This capitalist system started to displace the mode of production of what María calls gamonalismo, prevalent during the first half of the 20th century, the landowner class that accumulated by exploiting non-wage indigenous labor. These regimes of accumulation are represented in the novel by two brothers. Don Fermín embodies the industrial capitalism, and Don Bruno embodies the traditional landowner class of gamonales. Each sibling personifies a regime of accumulation. To be more precise, following Alain Lippier, an economist from the French School of Regulation, a regime of accumulation refers to the production of surplus value. Describes the fairly long-term stabilization of the allocation of social production between consumption and accumulation. This implies a certain correspondence between the transformation of the conditions of production and the transformation of the conditions of the reproduction of wage labor, between certain of the modalities in which capitalism is articulated with other modes of production within a national economic and social formation, and between the social and economic formation under consideration and its outside world. Lippier notes that for the reproduction of a regime of accumulation, it is necessary to have a mode of regulation, a set of cultural, social, and political norms that create the condition for a systematic way of producing surplus value. I propose that the advent of industrial capitalism is not only a shift in the production of capital and exploitation, but the transformation of an entire realm of intersubjective relations in which new desires surface. The collision of these two world images, two social paradigms, creates a crisis in which social relations are in disarray, causing a disruption of social segmentation and blurring cultural distinctions. I argue that this is a process of mimetic undifferentiation rooted in negative reciprocity, the conflictive dynamic that blurs social lines. Throughout the novel, conflict escalates as greed intensifies. Greed is a twofold formation that oscillates between tradition and progress, the remnants of the old caste system and the blind movement of capitalist progress. This fracture produces a new mimetic environment with the predominance of wage labor in the Peruvian highlands. The industrial economy of extraction introduced by Don Fermin threatens the existence of social life as a whole, forming what can be conceptualized as a mimetic regime of accumulation, the transitional moment between two modes of production in which the accumulation of mimetic conflict leads to the inception of new social relations. I quote from Marx, "Force is the midwife of every old society which is pregnant with the new one." Finally, I argue that music interrupts the rising conflict and offers a glimpse of positive mimesis by redirecting social relations to an object that nobody can consume or appropriate. All Blood begins with a man shouting at the top of the bell tower of the Church of San Pedro, a town in the region of La Huamarca, Peru. He's an alcoholic and fallen landowner to whom his sons have forsaken and seized over his properties. His name is Don Antonio, and his two sons are Don Fermin and Don Bruno. Each one perceives themselves as the embodiment of the image of what the future of Peru should be. Don Bruno is a doctrinaire Christian who sees himself as the pater familias and priest who presides over the life, well-being, and soul of the indigenous laborers that reside in his lands. Don Fermin wants to bring the industrialization that has taken over the coastal region of Peru to the Andean highlands. To erect his mine, Don Fermin needs to expropriate most of the land from the landowners of San Pedro. Don Bruno sees the arrival of industrial capitalism in the Andes as the ruin for the aristocratic and semi-feudal society, the displacement of the peonage or gamonalista regime of accumulation, and the replacement with a mechanized economy of extraction produces a crisis. In Girardian terms, it generates a process of undifferentiation that puts social segmentation in disarray. The indigenous laborers enter the world of capitalism as free workers, selling their labor force to Don Fermin. All Bloods is contextualized in a larger geopolitical constellation of trade, connecting Peru with the global patterns of capitalist enterprise. Overseeing the escalation of intersubjective conflict, the Wister-Bossart, an American transnational conglomerate, feeds from the rising tension in San Pedro to seize over the mine. A godlike figure named the Tsar runs the American conglomerate. He infiltrates Don Fermin enterprise to sabotage it and seize control over the land. The novel ends with Don Bruno shooting his brother, seeking desperately to restore the original order and contain the rising mimetic crisis. I quote from Girard, "Mimetism is indeed the contagion that spreads throughout human relationships and in principle it spares no one. If the model himself becomes more interested in the object that he designates to his imitator as a result of the latter's imitations, then he falls victim to his contagion. First part, primitive accumulation as a sacrificial mechanism. For the formation of the capitalist mode of production, there must be the emergence of a group of people that are not property, as is the case of slavery, but that are without property and have to sell their labor power. On the other hand, there are the owners of the means of production who are eager to accumulate capital by purchasing labor power, reshaping the set of human relations that preceded capitalist accumulation. According to Marx, the formation of the capitalist mode of production is the realization of this intersubjective relation between owners and workers. The process of hominization occurs in the ensemble of social relations. I quote from Marx, "The human essence is no abstraction inherent in each individual. In its reality is the ensemble of social relations," end of quote. As the American philosopher Jason Reitz notes, the production of capital depends on the field of human relations. The capitalist mode of production is a relational network in which workers and the capitalist class are on a common ground. The relationship is a lived process phenomenologically articulated. The space that separates the worker from the owner is not an ontological abyss, but a relational dependency that molds the production of subjectivity. This double bind between the production of subjectivity and the capitalist mode of production is co-constitutive of a regime of accumulation. In this way, the laborer becomes an object instrumentalized by the capitalist. The worker has become a commodity, and it's a bit of luck from him if he can find a buyer. And the demand on which the life of the worker depends on the whim of the rich and the capitalist. In the last chapters of the first volume of Capital, Marx proposes what can be characterized as the origin story of capitalism. The inception of the mode of production resembles a foundational act of violence. Expropriated from their land, peasants become workers who sell their labor force to survive. Beforehand, the peasants owned their means of subsistence and means of production. I quote from Marx, "So-called primitive accumulation, therefore, is nothing else than the historical process of divorcing the producer from the means of production." End of quote. The previous social distinctions are fractured, creating a way of social indistinction. The social undifferentiation is contained through violence to rearticulate the crisis and channel it through the new regime of accumulation. I quote from Jason Reitz. Primitive accumulation is situated between two types of violence and two types of power relations, between the feudal norms of forms of servitude that it destroys and the capitalist forms of exploitation that it renders possible. The question about primitive accumulation is the problem of violence, to be more precise, the instrumentalization of violence to mold differentiation of social positions. The displacement of the previous laborers from their mode of production enables owners to appropriate their labor force. In the case of Marx, he analyzes the vagrancy laws passed in Britain at the end of the 15th century that chastised the people expropriated from their soil and wandered aimlessly since the embryonic manufacturers could not incorporate them fast enough. The forebears of the future working class were outcast and punished by the society that produced them, as stated in the Psalms, I quote, "The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone," end of quote. Following Girard, primitive accumulation is the 0 hour of capitalism, the threshold between undifferentiation and differentiation. In all bloods, the capitalistic mimetic regime of accumulation transformed greed into madness, producing a type of conflict in which mimetic doubles are consumed by negative reciprocity, becoming the victim of their own violence. By feeding the flames, Don Bruno and Don Fermin end up burning themselves with the fire they started. Even the old landowner class falls prey to mimetism because of their dispute over the land with Don Fermin and Don Bruno. The extractive economy claims more property and subsumes an increasing part of the indigenous labor force to its logic of capital production, the new capitalist beast feeds on the old land devoted to crops. This way, primitive accumulation is a sacrificial mechanism giving birth to a new social order through a foundational act of violence. The indigenous laborer is the sacrificed body that is the condition of possibility of the new system of social relations, as Girard mentions about cultural institutions in ancient times. The idea is present everywhere. In Sumerian mythology, emerged from a single victim, Ea, Tiamat, Kingu. The same in India, the dismemberment of the primordial victim, Purusha, by a mob offering sacrifices produces the caste system. The body of the victim is sometimes compared to a seed, which must decompose in order to germinate. The germination is the same thing as the restoration of the cultural system damaged by the preceding crisis or the creation of an entirely new system. The play of doubles brings down to the same level the person who sees himself as superior to the society he seeks to rule and exploit. While capitalism does not bring conflict itself, it is not the original sin, so to speak. It gives, and I quote from Girard, mimetic phenomena a freer rein and to direct them to economic and technological channels, end of quote. Capitalism does not tear the pristine fabric of communal life. Capitalism reconfigures or disrupts the intersubjective framework by freeing obstacles and putting more social actors on the same stage to perform their conflict, their mimetic rivalry. From a Girardian perspective, it potentiates the interindividual ability for people to become obstacles to one another. Capitalism frees scandals, intensifying the contagion of violence. I quote from Girard. There is a mimetic competition of scandals, which continues until the moment when the most polarizing scandals remains on the stage. End of quote. Don Fermin thirsts for the spoils of the American capitalist enterprise. Given the ontological distance between the two, he's only in confrontation with the mediators of the Wister-Boster company run by the Tsar. Don Fermin wants to become the Tsar. He functions as an external mediator who gradually becomes his rival. There is a disproportionate logic. The growing distance between the two does not hinder his mimetic desire. It intensifies it. The overpowering capitalist subsumption by the Wister-Bossard is the aptitude that the landowner wants for himself, and the reiterative failure to appropriate the being of his external mediator produces an ontological prostration. As Girard emphasizes in his book Battling to the End, commercial relations have nothing to do with moral relations. They involve reciprocity regulated by money, which is quite different. It can always degenerate into conflict, end of quote. The desire for the Tsar is metaphysical because he becomes supernatural. The play of doubles brings down to the same level the person who sees himself as superior to the society he seeks to rule and exploit. Even more, the Tsar also ends up entrapped in a mimetic contagion, even if his position is quite far from the world of indigenous struggle. The forces of intersubjective desire intensify capitalist subsumption and the drive for rivalry. In all bloods, the pinnacle of accumulation of scandals is fratricide. Don Bruno and Don Fermin seek to fulfill, and I quote from Girard, the calling of desire by taking the tension between both to such an extreme that the fratricidal act answers that demand. Even Don Fermin sees murdering his brother as the only way to reconfigure the social order. In one scene, the wife of Don Fermin, Matilde, wakes up from a nightmare in which she hears Don Bruno saying to her, "Debes morir antes de que la ambición pudra tus ojos. You should die before ambition rots your eyes." Shook by the message, Matilde confessed to Don Fermin that she thinks Don Bruno must die. Don Fermin replies, "Te convenciste. You came to your senses." For the two brothers, murder is the realization of the ultimate goal of desire. The problem is that no victim suffices to flatten down the rising curve of mimetic conflict. No death can put an end to struggles because every struggle feeds on the corpses it produces. It always lacks the resources of catharsis and expulsion. The sacrificial mechanism no longer contains the violence, as it becomes just a ripple in the ocean of mimetic rivalry. And as a conclusion, music and positive mimesis. When the indigenous workers revolt against the emergent capitalist class embodied in Don Fermin, the novel does not equate social justice to revolutionary struggle, not only equate social justice to a revolutionary struggle, but with the type of prohibitions that render possible the continuation of social life and the divestment of mimetic rivalries. There is a specific scene in Old Blood that offers an alternative polity built around the event of grief and mediated through music. The Wister Bossar sends Hernán Caurejos, a geologist and engineer, to sabotage the extraction of silver. He commands Gregorio, a local mestizo, to plant some explosives inside the mine. Gregorio ends up blowing himself up and causing a section of the mine to collapse. He dies buried under the rubble. When the indigenous worker finally digs up the corpse, they recognize the body and word spreads around that Caurejos is responsible. As tension rises and the crowd demands Don Fermin the punishment of Cabrejos, a group of women start singing a funeral jarawi, a devotional Indian song of indigenous origin. As is described in the book, un coro de mujeres lanzó el grito inicial del jarawi fúnebre, del ayataki: no hay filo, no hay viento, no hay tempestad que se hunda en el oído y en la materia del ser humano. Todo lo silencia. A choir of women shouted the initial cry of the funeral jarawi, the ayataki: there is no tension, there is no wind, there is no plague that sinks in the ears and the body of humankind. The jarawi silences everything. By grieving the dead body, music functions as a taboo that reconfigures social distinctions. Ultimately, the song quenches the thirst for revenge and retribution, redirecting to the corpse, not to scapegoat a singular victim to find resolution, but to witness the ultimate goal and consequence of mimetic rivalry. The injured body is an object that desire does not seek to claim. It suspends the rivalry as the music puts people at ease. If the mimetic crisis is the loudness of violence, positive mimesis is the social silence that emanates from the jarawi. Various indigenous workers warn throughout the novel, if people go inside and got the mountain of its riches, the social body eviscerates itself. And with this I finish. Thank you.
Any question?
You seem to make some interesting correlations between Girard and Marx. And from everything that I've read from Girard, I've never seen a single direct comment on Marx. I do remember, so I'd like to hear perhaps you expound a little about how you see the relationships between the two, because the only things I remember in reading Girard is just, I don't remember where, but I think I've seen him sometimes express a little disappointment with contemporaries who were a little too supportive of Russian communism. I don't remember where, and I also remember in various occasions I see that he refrains from speaking, especially speaking ill of any thinker who was dearer to the left, like Foucault and Deleuze. I remember in one of the letters to Schweger, he speaks about Foucault and Deleuze, and then he says, these are their virtues. It is better not to speak of their weaknesses. He always refrains from it, and so I'd love to hear you expound more on the relationship between René and Marx.
Yes, most of the reference I found it in Clausewitz, But what I thought interesting is usually when people approach Marx is from the point of view of production, particularly when they approach capital, like the first chapter is about the formulation of the commodity form and all that stuff. But at the end, when Marx talks about the inception of the pre-capitalist system, that it's preceded by an act of violence, there is not such a thing as a social contract or something like that, but it's an foundational violence that shapes the mode of production. So by approaching Marx not so much from the point of view of production, but from the point of view of violence as a sacrificial violence, I thought it was a nice link. But I have not seen it done that way with other commentaries. I should read more to see if anybody has tried to make that link between Marx and Girard, but it's something that I just found interesting. That's why I am quoting Jason Reed, that he's very close to Negri and this like not to approach Marx in a different manner that is not the economicist approach typical from the Second International. So yeah, I hope that answers something.
Just a couple of comments that like come out of your of the novel. I want to read the novel now. I'm like, ooh, where can I get it? But then two things. One, you made me think about it. The one thing I do remember is in Battling to the End, Girard mentions briefly, like, we should not look at Nietzsche, Marx, Smith, and he goes through a rainbow of different thinkers, both on the left, on the right, and he says, because they only leave us with more scapegoats, which I think it's fascinating take, because he does refrain from that. But then you made me think about something with the song at the end of covering the body with this music. It's almost like they're returning to the dead the grievability. That's what I think Judith Butler would call it, grievability of the one who has been slain, basically, because in the previous order it doesn't deserve to be grieved, but now it's deserving to be grieved. So I'm wondering, how do you see that as a way out of the cycle of violence and mimetic crisis, not only in the novel, but also in the connections you made between Marx, capitalism, Girard, and all of that?
Yeah, I think in the Clausewitz where Girard, and I think in some, I don't know if it's in Evolution and Desire, in some of the interviews, that he mentions that the answer that Marx gives, or this approach to Marx, is that you need to scapegoat a social group so you can free the people that are victims from that social group in a way. So you are cleansing violence with violence in some way, right? But that's why I was interested in this idea of the moment in between modes of production and how it's articulated through violence. And that's what I call a regime of mimetic accumulation. And when it becomes to the grief, I think it in a way is detached from the ritual nature of labor and reclaims a social space that might be lost in the mist, particularly when it's profoundly religious. So time is understood differently. Community is understood differently. And in this case, because he is not the only victim in the novel, most of the victims remain unnamed. So by renaming the victim, it creates a new level of meaning. It's a little bit like Antigone, that you have the right to grieve and to bury the dead. So I think Arguedas is pointing into that direction. And this novel is interesting because if you talk with Arguedas scholars, everybody hates this novel. Even my advisor at my university told me, don't work all bloods, you should work deep rivers. That's what everybody's going. So I like this idea that this is the rejected novel of the Arguedian literature. So that's why I embrace it even more.
So, David Garcia-Ramos Calejo will talk to us about a map of the ruins, archaeology, memory, and truth in Mayorga's El Cartógrafo,
Very good.
the map maker, theater, as a map of silence or silences?
Thank you so much, Eric.
Okay.
It's on the bottom on the right, abajo a la derecha.
How do you aquí? Volvamos a la Ahí. Back.
Okay, thank you so much. We are going to begin with a map because everything ends within a map. And we are going to end with theater or with a theater because everything began with theater. We are going to start with a map, but we are going to do it a little bit theatrically. I propose a little mental experiment. I propose you. Close your eyes and think of a journey you have made in your childhood or youth, a journey that you have kept in your memory. Now, you have that memory? Okay. Now think of the point of origin and then the point of arrival. You have already 2 points. The drawing, the line, whether straight or broken, curved, constant, wavering, that takes you from one point to the other is already a first map. It is a map of the space you travel from one point to the other. They are separated by a distance that we can measure in meters, in miles, in inches, in feet, in kilometers. If we had the time, I could ask you to draw it, and I'm convinced that the result would be interesting for an anthropologist. Perhaps an urgent research project in times of GPS and Google Maps. It could be entitled From TomTom to Maps to Google Maps, a history of the disappearance of human maps. And I want to highlight here to note that Google needs to constantly readjust its maps to adapt to changes in cities, urban layout, roads. That's why we keep seeing Google cars photographing everything. But are they able to photograph change? The Australian anthropologist Tim Ingold says that human culture is born and grows with the line, that it is made up of lines. If I were to ask you now to tell me the story about your journeys, 2 things would happen. We would be giving anthropologists again and historians more material to work with, your stories, on the one hand. On the other hand, you would be creating a second map, a temporal one, a map of time. The map I am talking about now is the most difficult map. Mayorga's Cartographer mapmaker, says of these maps, it is the most difficult thing to represent. And the most important, time. The most important thing about space is time. How do we represent time? A map of time is not a chronology. We stop it here, we ate there, in this place, at this time, this happened. The map that is born from the story, from the monologue of the character I am turning you into, is a special map. It is a mobile, changing, dynamic map. We change our stories. Anytime we tell the stories, we add new elements. We remember new things. It is a question of scale, the scale of the map that Juan Mayorga wants to draw with El Cartógrafo, the mapmaker. Warsaw, 2 points, 400,000 is the scale of human life, of 400,000 lives in its temporality, the scale of memory, of what we can and must remember, of we forget and what we are forced to forget, of what we prefer to forget, to bury, to hide. 400,000 people were the people living in the Warsaw ghetto during the Second World War. We are going to start our journey today, or the Spanish word jornada is a theatrical name. It is each of the acts that make up a play. My intervention, which would like to be, might be theatrical, has 4 journeys or jornadas. What a map is, or the true nature of the map, how the map emerges from the flaneur, Walter Benjamin, the value of the fragment dissonance as a mark of silence. Let's start with a definition taken from an engineering manual of map projections. A map is a visual representation of a part or all of the surface of the Earth. It is expected that the various terrestrial features shown on the map will be approximately in their true relationship. The success of the representation depends on the map projection chosen to produce the map. Map projection is the orderly transfer of position of places on the surface of the Earth to corresponding points on a flat sheet of paper, a map. Since the surface of the sphere cannot be laid flat on a plane without distortion, the process of transformation requires a degree of approximation and simplification. It's a translation, and Carla Canulo reminds us yesterday morning. Juan Mayorga is a mathematician, as well as a philosopher and playwright. As a mathematician, he poses the question of the map in his plays as a problem to be solved, the scale, the geometric forms, their projections. In the same way, the geometry is born with the measurement of the territory of the city in the Politics of Aristotle. Cartography will be born with the desire of the power to dominate the territory of the city. From the origin of cartography, there is a distortion that consists of projecting a violence, Gewalt, of domination onto space and time. The question of the map, in a way, is in a way a question of translation. If the translation is good, the translated text is enriched. The map could thus enrich reality, the text that it translated, that it projects onto paper. But what is a map, or what is the nature of the map for the playwright Mayorga? Un mapa, o el mapa, hace visibles unas cosas y oculta otras, cubre y descubre, da forma y deforma. Si un cartógrafo te dice soy neutral, desconfía de él. Si te dice que es neutral, ya sabes de qué lado está. Un mapa siempre toma partido. You have the English translation there. Like cartography, theater cannot be neutral either. And this is what Mayorga says us about the function, the role of theater in the city. El teatro elige, nunca es neutral, nace de la escucha de la ciudad, pero traiciona su misión si se limita a devolver a la ciudad su ruido. Igual que un mapa, es irrelevante un teatro que no descubre la ciudad. El mejor teatro pone ante la ciudad lo que la ciudad se oculta. En vez de a lo general, a lo normal, a lo acordado, atiende a lo singular, a lo anómalo, a lo incierto, aquello que la ciudad quiere expulsar del territorio y del mapa. Un teatro necesario, como un mapa necesario, nos devuelve a la escena original. This expression is a very Girardian expression, the original scene. Aquella en la que la ciudad establece sus límites. This is theater for Mayorga. How does theater avoid turning into noise, into an amalgam of sounds, into party and sight? How does theater manage to touch the very root of the uprising, of the revolt, to follow the path traced by Didi Werman? Didi Werman wrote a very important book, big book, about uprising, the images of uprising. This morning, listening to David Friedberg with all the images of the hands, Didi Werman has done exactly the same with the uprising motifs in images along the history of the images in the Western culture. Okay, they are pressing hands to attack, to hold a hammer, or just to protest. Okay, or to pray also. Very good. So the very root of the rising. How does it reach the dark root of the cry to steal Lorca's word now? The dark root of the cry. I don't know if I have. No, I have not it. Very good. So the path followed by Mayorga's dramaturgy, which is the one we want to propose here as a map of silence is twofold. On the one hand, it is the apparent path of the distracted, curious walker who loses track of time. This is a very important expression. That of the Benjaminian flaner, who wanders, who strolls through the city and describes what he sees. The characters in Mayorga's plays tirelessly wander around the city, around the buildings. They do it with words, and they do it with their bodies. They tell it. Mayorga's theater is a theater of maps because of this. In their wandering, they accumulate details, descriptions, objects. This is especially evident in the case of El Cartógrafo, the map maker. The old man says, "A wedding? This is where the reception was. Here where they made her wedding dresses. This means Taylor, a jigs, the sous singer, with his box between his legs, always at the Café Europa. Schlengel wrote a sonnet this morning. Here," and the old man is pointing all these events in a map in front of the girl in the theater. And the girl, this is interesting because of the capitalism. Listen to this. 6 cases of typhus in the Russell orphanage. Yeah, it changed a little because I will explain this after. Sign of orphanage, sign of typhus. This is where the groom brought his suite. What is this mess? What is this mess? And what is the mess? The girl is drawing the map for the old man, for the old map maker. And the mess is that the price is difficult. It changes every hour. The price of everything in the ghetto, it's changing all the time. And the girl is trying to trace the price in the map. In Mayorga's theater, there is nothing resembling a classical structure. Perhaps in Himmelweg, we could speak of 4 jornadas or acts, but the rest of them is done by fragments, 14, 15, 21. His plays always consist of a series of fragments with which he plays at reconstructing the map of the reality he wants to map, which is the reality of evil. Mayorga's theater is a mapping of evil and of our part in it, because the real evil is not that which is suffer. It's not the one we suffer. That is not evil. The real evil is the one we commit, as Miguel García Baró points out in several occasions. He's a Spanish philosopher. The results, and this is the Walter Benjamin Arcade's project, El Libro de los Pasajes, and this is done playing with the different passages, the different images, one on the top to the other, no? The result is a work that consists precisely in this place of mirrors with the fragments that compose the play, like the work of his beloved Walter Benjamin, the play of light of the passages, arcades, that the flaner walks through as he passes through the city. In this way, in the midst of the overabundance of details, objects, people, a dissonance appears in the work, in the play, something that does not fit, that is out of place, as in a blind spot that we do not see, that remains off stage, obscene, a dissonance that alerts us, that puts us on our guard, that unsettles us as an audience. This is one way, no? I told you before, is twofold, no? On the one hand, this is the way. Mayorga map evil and map violence by confronting different fragments as in mirrors and doing this. On the other hand, this map of silenced voices, which the theater can propose, is a dynamic and open map. Mayorga conceives the writing of his theater as a living process that does not end with the published text. And this is a mess for the ones working on his play. Every time a test is staged, the test changes. A couple of months ago, Juan Mayorga sent me his latest version of El Cartógrafo, which he finished after bringing it to the States with Blanca Portillo. There are, regarding if you compare both versions, there are deleted scenes, changed places, rewriting, phrases said by another, but by one character put now into the mouth of other character. It is a text in which every word is thought out in a kind of openness that is not reduced to the text, but neither does it abandon it as an useless artifact. Mayorga, like his characters, works obsessively on his text. The second act of my paper is, the title is What is Silence in Theater, or Of the Limit of the Word, of the Frontier of Language, or of a Frontier Theater. Silence in Mayorga's theater, like silence in Beckett's theater, and in general in any playwright concerned with the limits of language in 20th century and 21st century, is a silence in which language seems to abandon its vocation to name the world completely and totally. But this abandonment of language will allow a new channel of meaning to open up from the silences, from what is left out of what is said. Theater as a map of silence is the frontier theater that dares to literally push words to their limit, to their frontier, to the place where they lose their cartographic power to represent the world. But this does not mean that Mayorga renounces to use the words, as Beckett. Unlike Beckett or Porcelain, the word limit or counter word is allied in Mayorga with silence, because he wants to say the silence without naming it. It is a frontier reason, or philosophy of the limit, as the Catalan philosopher Eugenio Trias has called it. Taking the word against that which cannot be said, resting the word on the unspeakable. Mayorga manages to reveal the form of silence without saying it, like the veil that covers an object and reveals the object to us. In its subtleness and lightness, the object it covers. The words that are spoken in theater are given form to something that is not said. Theater leaves us on the edge of silence. It is a map that is empty. Only the outline is drawn. In good theater, the author gives the audience this empty map and lets it continue beyond the border. The theater, as Mayorga is telling us, get lost. And in order to find some meaning on all this, it is not a theater without meaning. It's a very traditional, somehow a very traditional theater. There are characters, they are using words properly, and they have very, very daily dialogues. It's not kind of a surrealistic way of theater as Ionesco's or Beckett. It's not that, but it's not neither traditional. Sorry. The theater, in spite of everything, continues to be the place where the city meets to decide its future. He repeats this constantly in interviews and essays. The third jornada, the third act, is the map an archive, we ask, or how the map can contain other things, the Duerman and images in spite of everything, as Blanca has reminded us this morning. In theater, there are several important elements: the voice, the body, the costumes, and the objects that appear on stage. All these elements have been part of the theatrical codes of different times and cultures. Like maps, theater covers and uncovers, makes visible and conceals. The objects and the bodies and the voices and gestures that Mayorga puts on stage are part of an archive that wants to preserve the past, that wants the past to be like a lightning bolt that strikes the present in a messianic gesture, in Walter Benjamin words again. The text itself is a map and proposes itself as a map, but not only of reality or of the past, of the Soha in Himmelberg, or of the Warsaw Ghetto in this play, in the Mapmaker, but of itself, the accumulation of reference and signs, of marks, of elements that are easily connected to each other, do not only speak referentially of what they represent in a straightforward way. The atlas in the A.B. Barbour use of the word. A.B. Barbour, this is an art historian that produced these panels with the images related. It's very easy to understand the idea, even if it is very deep. It is not only the atlas that appears is always incomplete, but it makes sense. And I was started thinking, preparing this paper, that Mayorga's text and place are like atlas, not only as archives. It's not only the documental, the testimony theater, giving voice to the witness or to the victims. It doesn't work as an archive. It works like an atlas. And this difference is very important, because in the archive, the connection between the elements of the archives are not important. You have to preserve the elements, whatever they mean. But in the atlas, the meaning is the important thing, to organize the elements you are keeping. On a stage, as in Didi Berman table, because Didi Berman works with this big desk, putting all the images he's working with, or in the panel of Abby Barbour, boards, objects, characters, words appear, revealing something that cannot be written or said or mapped. And in spite of everything, the map presented by the theater says something presents us with something, And in spite of everything, the map presented by the theater says something, presents us with something, or at least shows us the way to explore it. Juan Mayorga wrote a short play entitled 581 Maps. In it, a man draws a strange map on commission. One shows the addresses of judges, another of clean ship hotels, another of first division referees, and so on, up to 579. Two police officers visit him to intimidate him. They ask him to do one. That makes the number 580. Hermida, that's the map maker name, ends up saying, it's a very interesting play, because the number 581, I don't know why, and I'm never there to ask it to Juan Mayorga, but it's a number that appears in a lot of plays of Mayorga. You can find it in a lot of plays. And also because Mayorga collected maps, is obsessed with maps. Okay, so many people try to say things they have never been able to say, says Hermida. I'm only the translator. The colors, the arrows are nothing more than that. Translating, and remember what I said about translation, and what Walter Benjamin said, very important test on translation, what they have in their heads. It has always been easier for me to draw than to speak. When I get out of here and tell my sister all this, what has happened here since I came through that door, I won't say anything. I'll make a map. A map of what? Of this place, and of us in it. Sorry, because the test was there. Of where and how everyone has moved, of what each of us has done and said at each moment in each place. On the floor, he draws the map. And this is the end of the play. He starts to draw the map on the floor of the same room he is staying with the two policemen trying to intimidate. He's becoming a victim. He's a victim figure, this Hermida, this map maker. Okay, and the police, they are looking for him because these maps are kind of disturbing maps. He has a website where he uploads all the maps, and it's dangerous to have the addresses of all the judges in Madrid, for instance. Okay, theater in Mayorga's hands has become a map of itself, a map of maps. I'm finishing. Didi Berman has written this book, a superb text on the bars of ghetto that can be read in the same key as Mayorga's play. Epars, Voyage dans le papier du ghetto de Varsov. From the title, I would like to highlight two elements. Epars, that is, dispersed, separated, but from what? the past, from the past, irretrievable, but also the present, deaf to the silent cry of the victims. The other word is voyage, a journey in the papers that miraculously survived thanks to the effort of Emmanuel Ringelbaum. Emmanuel Ringelbaum was a Jew in the ghetto, and he prepared this immense archive of everything that makes a culture a culture. Newspaper, pictures, photographs, the list of to go to the market, the schedule for the classes for the childhood school, and so on and so on. And they put them and buried them under the buildings of the ghetto. And they found it after they destroyed completely the ghetto. The ghetto, there are no ruins of the ghetto. They completely destroyed the ghetto. They find some of these boxes preserved and buried when they liberated Warsaw after the Second World War. Okay, Emmanuel Ringelbaum. The story of the Ringelbaum archive is not mentioned in Mayorga's work. Didi Uberman books also becomes a map for reading the archive, saving it from archivistic, freeing it from mere cataloging. The mechanism is the same, but this would be the subject of another paper. Last act, how could be theater a map of silence or about the origin of theater? And this is the Girardian slide. This is the archive, by the way. Sorry. This is one of the box they recover, and they restore very, very. I mean, they recover almost all of what is inside, and you can see it in the SOA. I think it's the Jewish museum in archive in Warsaw. You can visit it. Okay. The Girardian point. Walter Burkett long ago demonstrated the link between Greek tragedy and sacrifice. In fact, it is likely that the first theatrical gesture is a ritual gesture. For the French thinker René Girard, at the origin of human culture, there is always a human victim. I think I have not to talk too much about this. This is the description of that origin, in which I would dare to say that a theory of silence, a Girardian or mimetic theory of silence, appears in Noche as a cultural key. We need to show that it is not possible to resolve the problem of violence with the surrogate victim without at the same time elaborating a theory of design and signification, as Mayorga has been trying to do in his play. We need to show, I think that even the most elementary form of the victimage mechanism prior to the emergence of design should be seen as an exceptional, powerful means of creating a new degree of attention. The first non-institutional attention. Once it has reached a certain degree of frenzy, the mimetic polarization becomes fixed on a single victim. After having been released against the victim, the violence necessarily abates and silence follows the mayhem. This maximal contrast between the release of violence and its cessation, between agitation and tranquility and quietness, creates the most favorable conditions possible for the emergence of this new attention. The first name that precedes, the first name was preceded by the contemplation of the first victim, by its silence, and by the silence it provokes after the chaos and the shouting. The corpse of the first victim is given a name, and that name is divine, sacred, the name of a god. The name of the victim must not be pronounced, nor the name of the god, but it can be written. We can create the map of silence of the victim, as the girl from the Warsaw Ghetto does in the map maker. This is the final state, how do you call it in English? State instruction, the acotaciones. No, it's the instructions for the actors and actresses. And it's a state something, okay. But direction, state direction, but there is another state, nevertheless. La niña elige una baldosa del suelo, la levanta. En el reverso de la baldosa hay marcas. La niña hace otra marca. Si diésemos la vuelta a todas las baldosas, las veríamos como cuadrículas de un mapa. And finishing with this epilogue, which we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence, Wittgenstein. And with this square, it's a working public space with a student from a high school in the city. It consists in 2,146 engraved paving stones. It's in Saarbrücken in Germany. With the help of the 61 Jewish communities in Germany, a list of all 2,146 Jewish cemeteries in existence before the outbreak of the Second World War is compiled. The names of the cemeteries are engraved on the undersides of an equal number of paving stones. The total stones are 8,000 stones. So not all the stones has engraved the name of the cemetery. Okay? On the avenue in front of the Sof in the Saarbrücken, the seat of the municipal parliament and the regional government and administration under the National Socialist regime. The project is illegal. The professor started with his student this project illegally. They went to the square, they take a stone, they write the name of the cemetery and they put it back. Then they discover it. It was not approved by parliamentary vote until after work has commenced. And they approve it and they call it the Square of the Invisible Monument. Which is great because I don't know, and I don't want to ask Juan Mayorga about if he knows about this, but because I think it's the point of the atlas is to find these connections between different things. Mayorga used to say that there are things in his place that he didn't know he put there. And this is the good thing. We can build an atlas of meaning, a map of meaning on silences that is really meaningful. It is not the fragment. We are in an era of fragments, as Walter Benjamin said, and that doesn't mean that we are not able to build some meaning. And this square is meaningful as Juan Mayorga's theater. Thank you so much.
I want to do it the right way. David, congratulations. This is very powerful, and I am glad we are brothers in Benjamin. There is a quote in Berlin Childhood, 1900, that says, perderse en una ciudad como quien se pierde en el bosque requiere aprendizaje. But to lose oneself in a city, as one loses oneself in a forest, that calls for quite a different schooling. To lose oneself, a voluptuous surrender, lost in your arms, lost to the world, it's something you need to practice every day. So in the light of your speech, how do you think or conceive a compass? Because you describe very, very good your image of a map. But what about if I just have a direction, una brújula, a compass?
Yeah, a compass.
Yes.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I didn't think about the compass. And I should, because in all the maps you find not the compass, but the Rosa de los Vientos, the rules of winds, indicating where the north is, where the south is. And I'm not sure if we need, it's a really good question. Okay, let's try. I think the compass for Mayorga is the audience. He's not trying to tell us, okay, the meaning of the SOA or the meaningless of SOA or whatever is this and this and this. No. He tried to build up a place where the compass has to. I mean, you have to find the compass. The compass is. It's not like and I believe he has that compass, but it's the other. Just making a reference to Levinas, is the other the compass. I mean, it has to be the other, and our responsibility towards the other. I quote before my professor Miguel Garcia-Ramos, who says that this is kind of a sentence that is a capsule of wisdom, that the evil is not the one I suffer, it's not my suffering, or even the suffering of the other. The real evil is that I'm committing an evil action, and that should be the compass to understand the city and the map of the city, as Mayorga has tried to show us. Thank you so much. We are so tired. By the way, I just finished taking advantage and looking at you. In Mayorga's place, there is always a song in different ways, and a song that the characters they remember, but they cannot perform. So it reminds me at the end of the novel, no, with this song on the corpse, on the victim, no, and it's a song that the characters they somehow they try to remember. It's a childhood song, something that they kind of tararear. There is a word in English, I don't remember. Tararear, they mumbling, yeah, but they cannot perform for real, completely, until the end of the play. Himmelbeck, that song we set up in my university this play a couple of years ago, and we find this song, a song that has been composed in Treblinka in the camp and by Jews, and it is a cabaret song. It is a very funny song, talking about the destiny, about a lot of things. It's a beautiful song. This is one of the things that Mayorga didn't know. He put in his play, and he was grateful to discover. Well, back to you say something.
For example, in Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, Adrian Leverkuhn cannot fully engage with Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, particularly the Ode to Joy, because in his demonic music there is no community whatsoever. It's only its will. So it reminds me a little bit of that, like
the Ninth Symphony. I'm not a musician, but it's a chorus. I mean, this meaning of community, and a song has to be sung with the community. Otherwise, I mean, you can sing in the shower, but it's not the same. We all know. And then this sense of community by singing together a song is something that Mayorga, he talked always about the song, but it never appears completely performed, because it's kind of a pre-community theater. It's a theater that looks for the foundation of a new city. St. Augustine would say the city of God, a city where communion, real communion could be possible. And it's interesting because St. Augustine also says the importance of music and the hymns in the church to sing together to perform this community in a positive way.